Hey everyone, welcome to the 2Car Pros channel. My name is Ryan, and today I'm really excited because we're continuing our How to Build a Small Block Chevy series. Before we go any further, let's thank our incredible sponsor, Summit Racing. They have amazing selection, great customer support, and easy returns if you don't get something quite right. Summit Racing has built 5 engines with us, and the series would not be happening without their support. So make sure you get all your speed parts from summitracing.com. In this video, I will show you exactly how to put cylinder heads and valve train for a small block Chevy on our engine. Our small block Chevy happens to be a 3.3 stroker, but the process is exactly the same regardless of displacement. I'm showing you every single nut bolt size, torque spec, and technique so you at home can build your very own small block Chevy. If you missed any of our previous videos, I have them in a big playlist right here on YouTube, and it's located down below for your convenience. With all out of the way, let's jump in. So the next thing we need to do is put on our head gasket. This came out of our Summit Racing kit. When you're ordering head gaskets, make sure you are getting the head gasket that is accommodated for your bore. We're 30 over, so we got those head gaskets, and that's what I have linked down below in the description. Sometimes there are a range as well that'll work for 30 over, 60 over, 100 over, something like that. So don't be discouraged if you don't find one that's exact. You'll probably find one in a range. And then also notice that this has up written on it, so this is facing up towards you. You can't put them on backwards, they won't work. They only work the one way. So just place that on your dowels, just like that. It may not lay completely flat. As you can see, there's a little bit of an air gap. That's okay, because the head is going to squish down on it, and it will be flat. And also at this moment, I would press down on it and go around the entire bore with your finger to make sure that the head gasket is not intruding inside of the bore. This one has a little bit of a lip on the opposite way, so this is totally fine, and we can get our head. Now before I set the cylinder head down, I want to note that I've cleaned the bottom of the cylinder head, I've cleaned the deck surface of the block before I even put the gasket on there, and what we're going to do is we're going to aim on the bottom of the heads to our dowels that were installed by our machine shop, so we can line that up, and it won't sit down flush until it's on those dowels, so you can kind of search for them like that, and all the bolt holes will line up. So there we go. It is nice and set down on there. Don't worry if it's not like completely flush with the block just yet. The bolts will take it the rest of the way. Go ahead and remove our warning about lift. There we go. And now we can get our bolts, and there's a little bit of a sequence to those. And before we go any further, I'm going to point out that these are made by Summit Racing. They are all aluminum race-style cylinder heads, and they are 64 cc combustion chambers that should bring our compression ratio right to 10.22 to 1, which is like a hot streak compression ratio. You can still run 91 octane and not worry too much about it. Also, these are rated for 525 on the lift for the camshaft, and our cam is right at like 500 flat. So we have 25 thousandths of difference when it comes to our spring, because if you overdo this and you force the rocker arm to push down on this spring too much, you'll have what's called spring bind, which will absolutely destroy the engine. So it's really important, if you're going to copy this build, that you pay attention to those things and make sure you get the correct camshaft to your cylinder head. If you're going to change anything, really double check that spring bind clearance. So now we can worry about putting our bolts in. I have these bolts. They're made by Summit Racing. They are an aftermarket high-performance bolt, so they're not torque to yield, they're just regular torque. Now, there are 3 separate bolts on this cylinder head. You can kind of see where the long ones go, sort of in the middle, and then there's a medium length one that goes on the outsides inside of the valve cover, and the shorties go on the outside underneath the exhaust ports. So what I've already done is put the washers on the heads of the bolts with the bevel facing up. When you take them apart, you'll see what I mean. And I've also lubricated both sides of that washer so it's nice and lubricated. Although what we need to do is on the threads, we need to take our good friend RTV and just lay some on there. Doesn't have to be a ton. You can even spread it out like this, so that way if it goes into a water hole, you're okay and it's nice and sealed. So we can just drop that into one of the longer bolt hole locations, and then I'm going to use my 13mm on my electric screw gun, and it is clutched out very low. It's literally not even finger tight. It's very, very low, I promise. So we can do that again for our long ones. Sorry, this part is going to be a little laborious. So you do have to put RTV on every single bolt we put in here because they all go into the water jacket. So it's really important that you do that. Again, just snug. I have another long one, put it right there. And don't forget that I have lubricated under the washer and under the bolt head on every single bolt. I'm just not going to repeat myself a bunch. And this is the very last of my long bolts. There we go. So now what I'm gonna have is my medium bolts, and those kind of go right here, one on one side and then one goes on the other. An RTV every single bolt, like I said earlier. Awesome, so the ones inside of the valve covers are all done. Now we can worry about the short ones that go outside. So this is our last short bolt. Just down to touch. It's not tight at all because there is a special sequence and torque specification we need to adhere to. So here is a picture of our torque sequence. So you need to go in this sequence whenever you're torquing the cylinder head down. This is just the stock GM one. It's from General Motors, so you know it's correct. And I'm pretty sure that is universal to any cylinder head, but I would go ahead and double check it in case you have like a dart head or something like that. That might be different, but they're probably the same, but it's a good idea to double check it. Our final torque figure for today is 70 foot-pounds according to this fastener's specification. The manufacturer says 70 is where you want to end up, but don't go just straight there right away. I'm going to start at 25. So we're going to start on our first one right here. This is 2. 3 is this one. 4's right next door. 5 is up here. This is 6. There's 7. 8 is over there. 9 is this one. 10's right here. Here's 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So there's 17. That's our first pass. Now what I'm going to do is go up to, let's say 50 foot-pounds. We're just trying to break these up into as equal as we can stages. Doesn't have to be exact. So we start over at 1, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. All right, we're 2/3 of the way there. I also want to mention, when you're doing something like this, close your garage, mute your phone, don't get distracted. You can't be interrupted. You can't be wrong. Take it all the way up to 70 foot-pounds. And one more time. Start with 1. Go to 2. 3 is this one. 4 is this one. 5 is this guy. 6 is over here. 7 is right there. 8 is right there. 9 is here. 10 is this one. 11 is right here. 12 is right here. 13 is up here. 13, 14 is this guy. 15 is this one. Oh, home stretch. 16. Okay, here we go. Finish strong. 17. Ah, there we go. And our cylinder head is properly installed. So the next thing we're going to talk about is putting our valve train together. And where we start is our lifters. Here are ours, made by Summit Racing, and they sent them right on over. So you can see this is a hydraulic flat tappet design. That means that there's hydraulic fluid, oil, in here that controls the lash on the valve. This is basically the easy way out, if you ask me. They make these in solid, where you have to adjust the lash yourself periodically throughout the engine's life. This is kind of like a set and forget system, so it's the one I like. You can also go with roller hydraulic and roller solid, but this is what matches our camshaft. So make sure you get the lifters that match your camshaft. So these are hydraulic flat tappet. So this is what goes with the camshaft that I have linked in a previous episode. And what we're going to do is gingerly put them in a vat of clean oil. This can be any oil. It can be whatever you have as long as it's clean. It doesn't really matter that much. And you want them to sit in the oil for at least an hour at minimum, ideally overnight. Because what that's going to do, you can see when I put them in, they kind of bloop up air out of the lifter itself. So hydraulic fluid is able to get into that lifter and it pumps it up. So that way you can set the lash correctly, set it and forget it. And you can see as you kind of jostle it around a little bit, look, more bubbles are coming out. That's a good thing. That's why we leave it in here for a long time. Not to mention, they're getting lubricated, and you're gonna want everything nice and lubed up. As I often say, you can't have too much lubricant in an engine. And be ginger with these. You don't want to mar this surface, because if this surface has a problem off the bat, it'll eat your camshaft, which obviously you don't want. So just be very ginger and gentle with them. And there we go. All my lifters are nice and in this vat of oil. You can even kind of just jostle them around a little bit, nice and gingerly. So that way all the air gets out of them. And again, let them sit for an hour, but I'm gonna let them sit for at least overnight. So before we go any further, I wanna go ahead and mention I have taped up our intake ports on both sides of our cylinder heads. Next, what I'm gonna do is take a 17mm socket, a deep well, on my ratchet here, and I'm just gonna make sure that these rocker studs are tight. No, I don't have a torque spec. I'm just making sure they're not loose. And don't go crazy tight, because this is just cast aluminum. You could pull the threads out or worse. So just make sure all of these studs are nice and snug. They should be, for the record, but you know, with engines, I just like to double check things. And there you go, do that for both cylinder heads. So the next thing we can do is install our lifters that I have soaking in our oil. I let those soak overnight, like I said earlier, and you can even see some bubbles are still coming up, so you might want to jostle them just a little bit to make sure you get all the bubbles out of the lifter. Then what we can do is take one out of the oil itself, and I have this really fancy and nice racing assembly grease. The link is located down below in the description, specifically mentions lifters. So what I like to do is just glop a bunch onto the end of the lifter that is going to be interfacing with the camshaft, and then you just slide it on down. And that's it. Go ahead and do that for all 16 lifters. So the next thing we need to put in is our push rod. Summit Racing went ahead and sent over these ones, which are the stock length, which will work fine with our valve train geometry. And you can see that they're a little dirty for manufacturing. Let me open them. So you can see kind of on the bag they're in, that the bag's a bit dirty, which means the push rods are dirty. And even if the push rods came to me absolutely pristine, I would still do what I'm about to do, which is just clean them. So I'm gonna grab some solvent or carburetor spray and hose them down, wipe them off, and look at that. Look at how much dirt came off of it, quite a bit, but we're not done. What we're gonna do next is take our little straw end and squirt it through. Oh yeah, look at that. The push rod itself, because oil travels through the push rod into the valve train. Then we're gonna use a rubber tipped air sprayer and blow through our push rod, ensuring that there is absolutely no foreign particles inside of this push rod and that it is very clean. Go ahead and do that for all 16. So now we can install our push rods, and what I'm gonna do is just take my nice and clean push rod and just put it in our engine dip sauce. You know, link down below in the description, just like before, because you want a decent amount of lubrication on the end of the push rod so it doesn't eat up the surface between the push rod and the lifter. It can happen. And I'm gonna go ahead and install it on this lifter right here because it's the most pronounced one. It's a little bit easier to see. Put it through our guide plate and then lower it down into the lifter and making sure that it's sitting perfectly concentric so it can spin like this just fine. Also, another note about these guide plates, if you have guide plates in your heads, you do need a hardened push rod. If you do not use a hardened push rod, it will eat through your push rod and most likely destroy your engine. So just get the hardened push rod anyway because they're not much more money and it's nice to have the peace of mind. So now we can put our rocker arms on, and Summit Racing was nice enough to send over these. These are a premium race roller rocker unit. They're a double roller, which means the tip itself has a roller, and the trunnion is also a roller, so it is a double roller. But you can see it's a little dirty from the cardboard and the box itself. So I'm just gonna kind of give it the same treatment as our push rods. Hose it down with some sort of solvent, clean her off, get all the ickies off of it, and then we can take some compressed air. Really make sure that it is very clean. And look at that, that is awesome looking. So these are 1.5 ratio rocker arms, which are the standard rocker arm ratio. You can go higher on these to get more lift or something like that. But I've planned this entire build out using the 1.5s, and I've used those on all my small block builds, and they've always worked out really well. The thing you also want to pay attention to on this particular unit is that the roller itself actually has a groove. So it's not just like a standard one. So you want to make sure that the groove is shallow enough or deep enough to accommodate your valve stem and keeper, because you really don't want those to interact. These are cool though because they keep the rocker on track. So if it's down on the stud, it won't want to walk like this while the engine is running. These are really, really cool, and they are affordable compared to other roller rockers of the same type. And I bet they are going to be very excellent. I'm also just going to let them sit in oil for maybe an hour. It doesn't need to be very long because these aren't as vital for the oil to get in and penetrate in there as the lifters are. So this can be an hour, 20 minutes, something like that. So we can go ahead and do that for all 16. So now we can put on our rocker arms, but before we do that, we have to make sure our camshaft is in the correct position so we can get the proper amount of preload on it. And what that means is I want to put it on the base circle. In other words, I don't want either valves to be opening or closing. I want them both closed and have no tension on them essentially at all, base circle. So how do you assure that? This is the easy way. I always just put my fingers on top of the push rods like this and start spinning the engine. We can see that the exhaust port is opening. This one right here, opening, opening, beginning to close on the exhaust. Intake is coming up. Intake's going back down. Just a little bit more, and there we go. Now we know we're on the base circle because we're restarting the whole 4-stroke process. So we're on essentially the back side of our camshaft. We know that our preload is going to be perfect. So what I'm going to do next is just take our special sauce and just put it on the end of the push rod. You can also use like Permatex Ultra Slick, something like that. I'd use something a little more sticky than regular engine oil because you want it to stay put until you're ready to start your engine. And then we're also going to want to do the tip of our valves. With everything nice and sauced up, I can go ahead and grab one of my rocker arms out of the oil and place it down. Now, when you're placing this, you want to make sure that the round part of the trunnion is facing down, so the flat part is facing up. And we can go ahead and place that on our stud, making sure that the wheel is straddling the valve stem and the push rod is in its cup. And that's what it looks like when it is correct. And we can go get our rocker arm fastener. So the next thing we're gonna do is put on our locking fasteners. This is like a really trick high-end unit that came with our rocker arms that are pretty cool. I'm gonna take my 3/16 Allen and back it out about that much. It's about halfway for the lock itself. And then what I can do is put it on the stud itself, making sure everything's nice and clean, like this one is. And it's not close yet, so I'm just gonna get it down till it's touching the flat spot of the trunnion. Like that. It's the flat spot. The fastener is touching the flat spot of the trunnion down here where my end of my pointer finger is. Now you might notice the zip tie here on this push rod. All that's there for is a visual clue for you so you can see that I'm spinning the push rod. That's it. You do not have to put that zip tie on. That is for instructional purposes only. And then what we can do is start tightening this nut. Oh, there we go. See, it happened a little quicker than I thought. So you start tightening this nut until this stops spinning. So it is really hard to, I can like really grab it, tighten it a little more if you want, but it's not gonna spin anymore. You can grip it and like really turn if you want to, but you just want it till it's like touching and it can't turn anymore. See, I'm like trying to turn it just the tips of my fingers and nothing's happening. That's perfect, leave it how it is. Then, so what we're gonna do is imagine quarters of a pie. So you wanna just tighten it 1/4 turn more and just leave it where it's at. It's very good. That will put enough preload on the lash to where the hydraulic lifter is happy and can work effectively. And then we can grab our Allen and lock it down, holding our nut like this, tighten it up. And then I just like to give it a little that like that, and that's it. That's all you need to do. Go ahead and do that for this one as well. And then we'll have a whole piston done. So I've done the exact same procedure on the intake side of the equation for the cylinder. So the cylinder number 1 is completely finished. You can go ahead and do that for the other 7 cylinders. I'm about to do that. But before I do, I wanted to check the valve to piston clearance. And there's a number of ways you can do that. You can put Play-Doh on it and fully assemble it and then put the valve train on and take it apart and measure the squish and everything. But I have this really handy borescope camera and it's gonna let me look inside of there, and I figure, why not use it? And most of the time, you're completely fine, so I want to show you guys how much lift I have on this cam. It's a fairly big cam, not enormous, but fairly big. And I want to show you exactly how much clearance I have. So here we are inside of the cylinder itself. You can look down there. Look, there's my signature and 2 Car Pros, so you know it's me. And we're going to look up at the exhaust valve because that's what's going to open first. So we're going to come back up. So this would be the compression stroke. Kaboom! It happens. Yay! And then the exhaust valve should open on the next one. Here it comes. You can see it's starting to open a little bit. There it is. It's open. Piston's coming up. Keep coming. Keep coming. Keep going. And stop. We can see it's miles off. Miles off from the exhaust. Then go ahead and continue rotating the engine over. We'll go ahead and pay attention to the intake. And look, as the piston is running away, the intake valve is opening. And it's miles and miles and miles off. We're going to have it come all the way back up, just so you guys can believe me. There we go. Intake valve has already been retracted. So that is the complete cycle. And you can see that everything is just fine. It was miles off. I'm not worried even a little bit. And I know it's going to be a little closer when the lifter is pumped up. But again, it's so far off, I'm not even worried. With all of my rock arms assembled, the other side of the engine is exactly the same. We can go ahead and rotate our engine over and we can see what working valve train looks like. Yeah, that is absolutely perfect and very gratifying. So the next thing we're going to worry about is that drive shaft just down there at the end of my screwdriver, because that is our oil pump drive shaft. And you might be asking me why I need to worry about that. It's because when the engine was flipped over, it wasn't quite in its spot. And if that's not in its spot, your distributor's never going in and you won't understand why. Well, this is why. So what we need to do is grab a long standard screwdriver, kind of fish it down in there, and then just kind of rotate it around until it drops down just like that, and it's properly in its house, because the distributor is going to go right on top of that and interact with this, and that's actually what's going to spin our oil pump. So before we go any further, I want to point out that I have a 1/4 inch MPT pipe plug with pipe tape right here, because this goes directly into oil pressure and I don't want to pressurize it because it'll just go woo right out. I have also, unrelatedly, but still kind of related, is I've put a bolt here with some thread sealer onto the fuel pump push rod port, I guess you'd call that, because that does get oil in there. It's not pressurized, but it will seep oil out of this hole if it's not plugged, which mine now is. And at the rear of the engine, I've done the same thing with pipe tape and a 1/4 inch MPT plug. And then on the side here, this is typically where you'd put like an oil pressure sender right here, and this is a 3/8 pipe plug with tape. So now we can pressurize the engine oil and put it up into our valve train, of course, after we put the oil in the pan. And then of course at the back of the engine, I think I mentioned this earlier, but just in case I didn't, we have our 3/8 plugs here, along with our cam plug that can be put in, that should be put in by your machine shop. Mine happened to be put in by them as well, so I didn't have to worry about those, but make sure those are in before you try to give it any kind of oil pressure, or heaven forbid, put it in a car and try to start it. So now we're gonna add our engine oil. I know it might seem a little premature because we don't have the intake manifold on or the distributor on, but I wanna get oil pressure up to the top end, or make sure I have it before I go any further. And when you have a flat tappet engine with a flat tappet cam, you need this. This is Lucas Oil Zinc Plus, because modern engine oil does not have zinc in it, and you can flatten out your cam not having zinc in it. So this is a must. Add an entire bottle into your engine oil supply. And you can just go right here in the lifter valley. Don't worry, it'll find its way on down to the oil pan, I promise. And this is half a quart. This is 1 pint, so you need to kind of accommodate that with how much oil you have. Like our pan is a 6-quart pan, so I need this plus an additional pint, then 5 quarts on top, and that will be 6 quarts. And of course, the link is located down below in the description to this. And then for our engine oil, I just ran down to my local Costco and got 5W30. Could you use like 10W40? Sure, leave your comment down below about what oil you would use, but this full synthetic 530 I think is gonna be just fine. So I've already got a quart in it. I'm gonna put these 5 quarts in, and I know I'm at 6, so I'm all done. There we go. We know there's 6 quarts in there, and I know you might be saying, well, you filled the filter up. I did, but let's be honest, I probably put like 5 ounces in there, so it's not gonna be that much of a difference. If that really concerns you, you can check the oil level yourself using your dipstick. So now we can prime our engine with oil on. How do you do that? Well, you need a special tool for that or a modified old distributor you don't like. But the tool is a lot easier. I have this one made by ARP. It is located down below in the description. I think Summit Racing also makes this tool. I just happen to have the ARP one. And you'll notice that it has that flat spot right there, kind of like our standard screwdriver, right? So we can take our tool and insert it down in there. Don't worry about this collar. This collar is only here if you have your intake manifold in the way, which obviously we don't. So you can sink it down in there. And then if it doesn't go, try rotating the shaft like this until it sinks all the way down. Again, don't worry about this collar. And I can feel as I twist this, it is definitely loading on the oil pump. So I know it's engaged correctly because you can feel it have drag. If this just spins freely like wee, then it's not in all the way. But as you can see, this one is taking a little bit of force to rotate over. So now we're ready to grab our power drill. With our power drill attached, we can start loading the pump. There we go. I can already hear it loading and doing good. So about that fast is how fast you want to go, and it's going to sort of geyser out of the rocker arms like this. So go ahead and load the drill up. Might take a minute. So here it comes. Oh yeah. That's what you want to see right there. That's how you know your engine's gonna have oil pressure. So make sure on every single rock arm it looks like this, it's starting to sort of ooze out. And as that's happening, I'm gonna rotate the engine over. And what that's gonna do is give different surfaces abilities to be lubricated. So mix it up a little bit and then do it again. And that is exactly what you want to see. This engine is properly pre-lubricated. And that is how you put cylinder heads and valve train on a small block Chevy. This was a super fun day and the engine is really looking like something. We are on the home stretch of this build, so make sure you subscribe and don't miss me finishing this engine, then strapping it to a dyno to see just how much power this bad boy's making. Huge thank you to Summit Racing for making this series possible, and to you for watching. If you found this video helpful or interesting at all, please consider becoming a member down below. It is a direct way to support what I do here on the channel. Otherwise, a like, comment, and subscription go a long way, and I really appreciate it. Thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.